be able to join us tonight. The theme of tonight's meeting is peace in the Kurdish political movement and the changing political context of the Middle East, in particular the critical role of Abdullah Ocalan. We're hosting this today because as many of you know and will be aware, it was Abdullah Ocalan's 74th birthday on the 4th of April. And it's also the 22nd year of his appalling incarceration on İmralı Island in Turkey. We wanted to use this to bring attention to his plight and to continue our efforts to build the campaign demanding his release and the beginnings of a new peace process in Turkey and the wider Middle East. I think you're all aware campaigning has been very difficult with the severe restrictions that we're living in at the moment in the COVID situation, and it's understandable that many people are focused on priorities of jobs and health and safety, and sadly that often creates a more insular perspective and less of an international perspective. So it's important that we carry on our efforts. Despite those difficulties, we had a really good rally last July. We've been supporting the work of Lloyd and other colleagues in the APPG with the investigation into the human rights situation in Turkey. We've held meetings trying to lobby the Foreign Affairs Minister of the KRG to avoid inter-Kurdish conflicts in northern Iraq. And we've continued always with our solidarity work and contact with our friends in all parts of Kurdistan. I think it's important just to recognize that events have not stood still at all while we have been all under the cosh of the COVID situation. I've just posted very briefly a map, put a map up for you to see. The repression in Turkey is really increasing dramatically with threats to ban the HDP and many other things that our speakers will touch on. If that wasn't enough, they've been launching attacks into northeastern Syria, especially around Ionissa, and threatening to attack Şengal. We've also seen Turkish aggression in parts of the Eastern Mediterranean. While that's been going on, there's also been, thank God, a change in the White House. I don't think anyone's delusional, but I'm sure everybody welcomes the fact that Trump is gone. We know that Biden is supposed to have a better approach towards the Kurds and a more hardline attitude towards Turkey, but we will be seeing whether that is actually transpiring into reality or not. So we're going to get the chance to hear about all of those issues from our fantastic panel of speakers this evening, and we'll also have time for some question and answers at the end of each panel session. So without further ado, colleagues, I'm going to move straight to the first panel of the evening. We've got 4 speakers to give an overview of the situation as they are experiencing it in their various parts of Kurdistan. I will introduce and give you a short description of the speakers as I call them. The panel will be Badia Özgürke Ertan, Meral Cicek, Sally Muslim, and Garan Ozcan. So Badia is a lawyer and worked as a defender of human rights at the Van branch of the Human Rights Association in Turkey and the Van Bar Association. Badia was elected as a member of parliament for Van, representing the HDP in 2015, was re-elected again in 2018, and in 2019 was elected mayor of Van. She was then dismissed as mayor by the Ministry of the Interior, as it was the case in many areas, and replaced by one of Erdogan's appointed representatives. So without further ado, I'm going to hand the floor to Badir to just say for the next 10 minutes what the reality is at the moment on the ground in Turkey. Badir, I should say, is speaking from Germany at the moment. Again, a reflection of what is going on and the impossibility of trying to do things at the moment, or the danger of it in Turkey. Badir, it's great to have you with us, and the floor is yours. You need to unmute though, Badir. There you go.
Thank you for inviting me. I hope we've had a good and productive discussion today. As SImon mentioned, I am a Kurdish politician who has been elected 3 times since 2015. 4 years is a very short time to be elected 3 times, but this is a typical picture of Turkey and can give an idea about the situation in the recent years. And now I am speaking with you very far away from my homeland and family as a politician forced into exile. The ongoing struggle for freedom, for political and cultural equality has cost the Kurdish population in Turkey a lot. Thousands of politicians, journalists, or activists have been sent to prison. Tens of thousands had left the country over the last few years. The violence and severe violations against the Kurdish people and HDP party representatives in these last 5 years alone may be the answer to many of your questions. Let me give you a few examples only. For just the last few weeks, the attitude of the government that doesn't comply with the decision of the European Court of Human Rights. Lastly, about Demirtas and Kavala. The decision to withdraw from the Istanbul Convention on Preventing and Combating Violence Against Women. This was decided in the middle of the night with a single signature of President Erdogan and without authorization by the parliament. And the arrest of our deputy Gergerlioğlu, who was unlawfully silenced and imprisoned for exposing the government's torture practices every day. His official crime was only a retweet. And demanding to close HDP party representing 20 million population in Turkey and demanding a political ban on over 700 politicians, including me. And the appointment of a trustee to the renowned Boğaziçi University in Istanbul as a rector. And the list goes on. The growing demands to govern every basic structure with trustees so willing to silence fundamental rights in Turkey. The disproportionate attacks and violence that are taking place at workers, environmental, at women's, or at students protesting. All of this can give you an idea about what is actually happening and what kind of regime is Turkey's 2021 government is. In order to explain the reason for the extremely aggressive attitude towards the HDP and the Kurdish people, I first need to explain the HDP's idea, because the HDP was not just founded as a political party. Its fundamental idea is to be a path to peace. We believe in pluralism, in the possibility of a country in which all individuals as well as minority groups can live together with their own identity in an egalitarian way and without hurting each other. During the peace process, the resolution of Kurdish question was being discussed all over Turkey between the years 2013 and 15. The state was negotiating with Mr. Öcalan in İmralı Island. During this period, there was a belief in the society that the Kurdish issue could be solved peacefully. It was a huge and really very important hope and commitment in the society. The Dolmabahçe Agreement was signed with the state and declared to the public. Precisely in the ongoing peace process, an idea came into being, pioneered by the Kurdish political movement. With its knowledge and experience, the HDP was established. It has implemented a co-governance model with the goal of women's emancipation and equal representation, also of fair representation for all ethnic and other minorities, and in which the poor and the oppressed have equal say. It was this idea that was the most feared and therefore thought to be destroyed by the powerful. Because when the HDP model was met by a great enthusiasm across Turkish society and was successful in elections and inspired developments in Rojava, of course, this revived the old Kurdish phobia of the state. However, this time, the state was not only facing the Kurds as a problem, but rather a large progressive segment of society. So in 2015, the peace process was abruptly upended by Erdogan. First of all, the meetings with Mr. Öcalan were stopped and he began to be severely isolated. As negotiations ended, the pressure against the HDP started. In the election year of 2015, several meetings of the HDP were attacked with bombs. Despite all odds and attacks, HDP crossed the 10% threshold in the June election. We won 80 seats and even possible representation in a coalition government. However, as you know, this result was found unacceptable. The same year, the country was forced to re-elections in November 2015. During these 6 months, the well-known Suruç and Ankara explosions of ISIS took place. However, the HDP was held responsible for all the bombings across Turkey. A heavy propaganda campaign was launched against the HDP. The judiciary, the legislature, the executive, a mostly partisan press and state media were together involved in this dark propaganda. Journalists who reported facts and a more balanced view were silenced or arrested. So the media became completely closed to us. Deputies of the HDP, including the co-chairs, were arrested. Kurdish cities were subjected to heavy attacks with all the state's means of war. The state committed the most serious crimes against its own citizens and bombed cities like Sur, Cizre, Nusaybin, Gever. Yeah, the 2016 coup attempt was turned into an opportunity, and a state of emergency was declared then, and led the foundations that gradually but ultimately changed the country and led to the establishment of today's authoritarian and in many ways fascist regime of the AKP and MHP in Turkey. In the name of combating the coup, there were serious violations where those engaged in politics of our party were arrested every day. Municipal councils and mayors chosen by the Kurdish people were replaced by government trustees. However, it was not only our party, but also all the opposition groups in Turkey were under pressure. Many people who objected were arrested, NGOs were closed, and people were fired one midnight with a single signature of the president, forced into exile, and thus the community was silenced. I can briefly say that since the disruption of the peace process by Erdogan's AKP, human rights violations have been systematically on the government's agenda and continue to be so. This change in the form of authoritarianism and one-man regime in Turkey has led to human rights violations. It led to intolerance to elections and to the appointment of trustees based on colonial mindset. It led to a reckless attitude towards core values such as the rule of law. Security policies prevented freedoms and an increasingly unstable geography was created. We all know how deteriorating habitats have negative effects on developed countries. In confronting this reckless attitude and in encouraging concessions of the government of Turkey, the role of the international community is essential. States that remain silent to the Erdogan administration's practices and threats, like sending refugees or with concerns about commercial partnerships, should know that they are enabling the growth of fascism and dictatorship right next to them. They should also know that this regime, in fact, produces refugee and war. Only 2 days ago, EU leaders visited Erdogan, and the priority of EU leaders was not non-implementation of the judgments of the European Court of Human Rights or any other topics concerning rule of law and human rights, because they called that visit as the escalation of Erdogan. The most common conviction about that visit is about on refugee bargaining. So it was a visit that meant nothing but encouragement to Erdogan. But who will care about the most fundamental questions of democracy if the highest representatives of the EU Commission do not care? The recent visit is unfortunately not the only example of a totally wrong approach. For example, the president of a European Court of Human Rights cannot visit a trustee in Mardin or an AKP branch when he goes to Turkey. The EU cannot only express their deep concerns when Turkey invades Afrin or when soldiers burn people alive in Cizre. By encouraging Erdogan, Europe turns its back on Kurds and other minorities. The consequences will be more conflicts and war, further violation of political and human rights, more appointments of trustees to municipalities and universities, the removal of science from education, more violence against women, more arrests of mayors and deputies, and finally, it will force more politicians, academicians, lawyers, journalists into exile. It results in oppression to the entire opposition inside and invasion and war outside. The Turkish regime is right now trying to close to HDP and ban their politicians permanently from politics. Yeah, the time for me is finished, but as last words, in fact, this regime is experiencing a great crisis within itself and has no desire to resolve the crisis. He wants to survive with the dictatorship, but he is imposing his crisis on the whole Middle East and Europe with an aggressive policy. EU neighbor states to Turkey should try to give an answer on this question. Which kind of country do they want to be a neighbor with? Tyranny or democracy? War or peace? What can we do all together for a democratic Turkey and the Middle East? Thank you for your time.
Badir, thank you so much for your intervention and for flagging up really the outrageous approach of the EU in ignoring some of the human rights violations and continuing to engage with Erdogan as if everything is okay. I do appreciate, colleagues, we've given our speakers an impossible task to try and give a feel for what's happening in their respective areas in 10 minutes. But Badir, it was a brilliant overview and thank you very much. I'm going to give the floor straight away to Salih Muslim. Salih Muslim was the former co-chair of the Democratic Union Party, the main party of the autonomous administration of North and East Syria, and as deputy coordinator of the National Coordination Committee for Democratic Change. He was the most prominent Kurdish representative for much of the Syrian civil war. Salih's joining us from Rojava and Kamishli, and so far the link has been really good. Salih, it's a privilege to have you with us. Thanks ever so much. The floor is yours. But you do need to unmute yourself, Salih. That's it.
Well, thank you very much, SImon. And thank you for all the people who give me this opportunity to talk to you. And thank you for all the followers of these events. Well, regarding the Rojava, what's going on, I think Rojava is a part of Syria, as everybody knows. And Syria, maybe since 10 years, we have finished 10 years of war, internal war in Syria, and even from the invasions from the outside. But what's the pity, as the Syria solution is not in the hand of the Syrians now, because we have all the powers. I mean, the United States, we have the Russians, and we have local powers like Turkey, like Iran, everybody is involved in the Syria. So the Syrian, they don't have any word to say. For our case in Rojava, from the beginning of the Syrian conflict, we have our different approach, which was dependent on ourselves, and we didn't call anybody to come in, not Russia, not the United States, not Turkey, and we tried to defend ourselves as we can, and we succeeded to come to this stage. But at the end, I mean, the solution for overall Syria, I mean, not in our hands, because we still, our policies and our dialogues with everybody, we are still insisting to be part of the Syria. And the Syrian solution, if it's solved, it means the Kurdish issue will be solved. The Kurdish issue in Syria is a democratic issue, I think, when the democracy is implemented in Syria, and then the Kurdish issue also will be solved. So this is the point we are insisting on. As you know, there were many, conferences and many efforts like Geneva, like Sochi, like Asitana, and so, and everything was finished because all these people were engaged how to manage their interest in Syria or in the area also. And now Syria is became between, the Russians and the Americans and NATO and the other countries is just maybe a tool to be used. If they want to get something in Caucasian, for example, they make pressure in Syria or in Syrian parts. And also the most important thing, the Geneva talks, which was, we had the resolution 2254, which was for solving the problem, it didn't implement it. And the cause for that, because Turkey is insisting not to do it. Turkey, they have their own plan just to finish the Kurdish people everywhere, not only in Turkey, but also in Syria and in Iraq and everywhere. Maybe it's coming step by step. For Syria, also, they don't want to have any solution because they consider if Syria issue is solved, it means it should be democratic Syria. At that time, the Kurdish people will get some democratic rights. So it shouldn't be solved. So this is the problem till now. And this is the actual thing what will happen. And now, the now situation, we have in Rojava, we are trying to defend ourselves against the Turkish invasions with their mercenaries. As you know, they have occupied Afrin. The Afrin people are still resisting, there. And we have Afrin units to defend Afrin. And also also the people in Gresipi and in Serikani also, there are some resistance against them because the people are not accepting them. And we have from our side as the administration, Northeast Syrian administration, we have camps. We have now a camp called in Shahba, many camps, small camps and the big one. We have about 120,000 people, which they are displaced people from Afrin. They are waiting to be returned. And also for Tel Aviv, we have also the camps for those displaced people from them. And also from Serikani, we have Washokani camps, which we are trying to help them. From the other side, still we have, maybe you are following in the news also, we have attacks in daily basis. In Anisa, which is the border of these lines between us and the Turkey. Also, we have daily clashes in Afrin, close to Afrin place. They are attacking and shelling all these areas with the refugees. This is from one side. The other side, we still have those Daesh and the ISIS cells, which is located mostly in the Deir ez-Zor area. We and our, partners, just like international coalition, we have operation every day. Catching them, following them. There are killers, suicide. They are suiciding the people over there. So there is a fighting still going on, but it's not a big, fight. It's just following those sleeping cells, and mainly those sleeping cells, they have connection with Turkey, they have connection with the other powers which they are using them, and even some of them, they have relation with Iran. From the other side, maybe the last week you have followed also, we have this Al-Hol camp. Just for your information, to make clear, we have this camp, Al-Hol camp is just for ISIS women and children, which they were, I mean, moved from Baos and the other areas to this area. It's continue about 60,000 people, maybe about 25 or so. They are from Iraqi refugees, and we have maybe about 20,000 also from Syrian ISIS family members, and we have about maybe 12,000 which they are foreigners from different countries. But all of them, I mean, they are civilians, they are children, and we are calling them to get them. I mean, even the countries, nobody want to be involved because nobody that like the ISIS, and they don't like the ISIS children, the ISIS women, so they are rejecting to take them. So what we have to look after them, otherwise we cannot allow them to go. The second point, and we have about 12,000 also, those are Daesh fighters. They are not in the camps. They are in the prisons. I mean, many prisons in Hasaka, in many places. And they are waiting to be judged, I mean, to have a court and judging them. And this is also the international issue, which we are calling everybody to help us to make a course in Syria, because the crimes being committed here, I mean, in Syria. And some of them, because, I mean, is international terrorist organization and international crimes also, because some of them, they have crimes in England, some of them they are in France, in Europe, in different countries, but mostly they are in here. So what we are trying to do to make a course here, and should be supported internationally, it maybe some could need some special laws also, special regulations for them, how to judge them, because even for children, for example, we have one woman, she has 3 or 4 children. And the father of those children is different. One is Iraqi, one is French, one is British, one is, I don't know where they are. So how we are going to send them? To where? Who should accept them? So what I mean, there is an international issue, and everybody should be involved this one to solve. So this is another issue. Of course, shortly I want to say. And the second one, as I said, I mean, we have also this pandemic situation. What we are trying to do to make, these lockdowns, and now, at this moment, we have three cities are lockdowns, Qamishli and Hasaka and Raqqa, because the number is increasing, I mean, and we don't have opportunity, only the way we have to call the World Health Organization, I mean, to get some vaccinations for us, but nobody is trying to help us, and we don't have those millions. And even if we don't have somebody to talk to us, because they are talking to the states. We are non-state people, so nobody wants to deal with us. So this is another problem. Only we can do, we have to contact this WHO to do something for us. We have heard that they are going to supply the Syrian government with a number 1 million or 900,000, but I am sure nothing will come to our areas, because the regime also went to get rid of us. So this is another problem. So this is our situation. In spite of all of this, we are trying to look after our people. We are dividing our breads with everybody, and even for displaced people and for those refugees, trying to keep the security of those prisons, because maybe a lot of them, they want to escape, and maybe they are trying to have connect with Turkey to make them escape from there, as they have done before. I mean, during their invasion, they have just Many of them, they escaped to Turkey and then they went to France and other places. So this is another problem. And so our life here is a struggle, you see. So this is the situation we are living, and I think maybe we don't have too much time to talk more. This is the situation, and if you have any questions, I'm ready to answer. Thank you very much to give me this opportunity.
Sally, thank you very much. And as I said, I do appreciate it's so little time to try and cover it, but I think you've done a fantastic job, at least of giving us an impression of the difficulties and the challenges that are faced there. And we obviously all take our hats off and salute you and all of your colleagues for managing to keep going in the way that you are. I'm just very conscious of time at the moment, so I'm going to move straight over. Geran, I know, has got to go at 7. We're going to eat into some of the question time, but I think it would be useful to just hear Meral first and for 10 minutes, and we'll go straight to Geran afterwards. So Meral, the floor is yours. Meral was born in 1983 to a Kurdish guest worker family in Germany. Was active in the political and women's movement, studied history and sociology at the Goethe University in Frankfurt, and worked as a reporter for the daily Kurdish newspaper in Europe, and still writes a weekly column. Since 2014, she co-founded the Kurdish Women's Relation Office in northern Iraq, southern Kurdistan, and is a member of the editorial board. Meral, the floor is yours. You're going to say a few words about the current situation in southern Kurdistan.
Thank you, SImon. A kind of brief overview of the situation in Iraqi Kurdistan. The tensions between the KDP, which is, let's say, the party on power, in Iraqi Kurdistan, and the Kurdish political movement show oneself mainly in 3 fields. The first is the mountainous countryside, where the PKK guerrilla fighters have a presence or even control. The second is Shingal, the homeland of the Yazidi people. And the third field would be political repression against organizations, media outlets, and sympathizers. And this is currently not limited to people and organizations affiliated with the Kurdish political movement, but oppositionists in general. There are dozens journalists, activists, politicians imprisoned by KDP currently because of their criticism. And I would tonight talk a bit more about the first and the second point. So the first thing is, what is the current state of play following the recent events in Mount Gare and the KDP's blockade of PKK bases? The KCK co-chair, Cemil Bayik, recently announced that there are some efforts to establish a dialogue between the PKK and the KDP. But despite this fact, the KDP blockade of PKK bases continues. Actually, recently, the KDP has banned entrance and exit in 53 villages in Bradost region, which is partly, or say by half, occupied by Turkish military, and where you have Turkish signal towers, so that Iraqi SIM cards automatically switch to Turkcell mobile operator. And Bradost area is 50 kilometers north of Kandil. Another recent development is the KDP attack on a PKK base in Berdesore, which belongs to Hakurke, where Turkey launched a military operation 2 years ago, which is still continuing, on Nevros on 21st March with heavy weapons. The PKK guerrilla fighters withdrew, and by doing so prevented a clash between the Peshmerga fighters and the PKK guerrillas. And the question here is, was this a coordinated attack decided on by central KDP leadership, or was this a local incident? And if this was not a coordinated attack, then one might think that it reflects internal conflicts within the KDP leadership, and that some elements aim to prevent the establishment of a dialogue with the PKK. And is this only an issue of internal conflicts inside the KDP leadership, or has it to do also with Turkish intervention? So what is the role of Turkey here? Because while KDP affiliated Peshmerga forces attacked the PKK camp on Nevros, Turkish warplanes and drones were flying over that particular region. So I want to go now to the second point. What is the situation in Shingal, or let's say Sinjar in Arabic, the homeland of the Yazidi people? There is still no permanent solution in Shingal. Lasting solution would be to acknowledge the political will of the local people, of the Yazidi people, and that would mean self-governance and self-defense. Shingal remains under risk, either from Turkey or from Iraq and the KDP. Just a few days ago, the Turkish defense minister, or one should say war minister, repeated Turkey's threats on Shingal and Mahmur refugee camp. A deal in most parts about the dissolution of Shingal resistance forces and Ezid Khan Asayish forces, means local security, and the autonomous administration of the Yazidi people was signed between the Iraqi government and the KRG Interior Ministry, which is KDP, on October 9. The Iraqi government was not able to implement this deal until today, mostly because of two factors. The first one is the resistance of the local people. And the second one is Iran-affiliated armed forces or militias that aim to prevent further Turkish influence and presence in that particular region, not just in Sinjar or Shingal, but in general, let's say this whole region, let's say Mosul and Tel Afar, where you have a Shia majority. They want to prevent further Turkish influence and presence and also occupation in that region, which is of strategic importance for many forces, not just, let's say, for Iraqis, for Iranians, or for Turkey in general. So due to Turkey's threats and intelligence that Turkish military would launch an operation against Shingal in mid-February, the Popular Mobilization Forces doubled their presence in Shingal up to 20,000. Iraq government is continuing to send ultimatums to Shingal and to threat the people with a military operation to dissolve them. KDP is the only force which is continuously pressuring for the implementation of the deal, in a way also representing the will of the Turkish government. But in fact, the issue of Shingal is reflecting Iraq's big political problem. Iraq as a multi-ethnic state has been plagued by years of ethnic and sectarian conflict, what creates the ground for foreign intervention, supporting local communities' participation in political decision-making, paying attention to their collective will, and by doing so, developing a democratic relationship between the central government and local communities is essential to overcome these conflicts. Abdullah Ocalan would call this model, which is based on self-governance, democratic nation. He has been proposing this model as a lasting solution to ethnic and sectarian conflicts, not just in Iraq, but in the whole Middle East. But this is something neither the political factions in Iraq, nor KDP, nor Turkey, nor regional and international, especially Western forces want. And in this sense, the question of Shingal has become an international question, what makes the solution so difficult. And in this sense, I think it will remain on the political agenda for some more time. Thank you.
Thank you as well very, very much, Meryl, for giving us an absolute up-to-date picture of what's happening there, and also really bringing into focus how central Shengal is, and also the solutions that Ocalan has been putting forward all the time that had such success in the area of Rojava. Look, colleagues, I'm really aware that we're tight on time. I'm going to introduce our next speaker, which is, he's already corrected my pronunciation. I'm sure I'll get it wrong again. Geran Özcan, who is the HDP representative in the United States. He studied in the UK, worked for the Center for Turkey Studies for a number of years, but since 2017, has been in Washington. The idea, as we've heard from our other speakers, what is happening on the ground. Geran should be able to tell us exactly now, can we expect any change in US policy? What is the current situation there? Geran, the floor is yours.
Right, thank you, SImon, for giving us the opportunity to speak about these very important issues. And yeah, so now, where do I start? Firstly, with the current administration, I think the first place to start is to say that this will be different to the Trump administration that we've had for the past 4.5, the previous 4 years. Because, I mean, if somebody had asked me in 2016 what I thought of the American president and what impact or influence it would have on American policy, I would have just said, well, the US is a country of strong institutions, and the person that resides in the White House isn't really that important. Boy, how wrong was I to think like that, because we saw that between 2016 and 2020, what an unstable individual residing in the White House could do. And so, saying that, I think we have to kind of understand the coalition that the Democrats built to push Biden over the line, and from women, progressives, BLM, LGBTQ movements that really all just wanted to get rid of Donald Trump, and essentially it was these factions in American society that pushed Biden over the line in November 2020. And so while this doesn't necessarily mean that the current administration of the White House will listen to these factions in devising policy going forward, I think from the way the cabinet was formed, and early indications are that at the very least he won't be able to disregard them moving forward. And I think we've already seen this in certain actions like the White House statements coming out against Turkey when it withdrew from the Istanbul Convention, and other things as well, but also with countries like Saudi Arabia and the US having to take a little bit of a different stance to these places and issues, just because of the base and the coalition that was built that supported the Democrats in election time. Now, we've seen this very significant shift in DC over the last 4, 5, 6 years, whereby American lawmakers, American institutions, foreign policy institutions, think tanks are increasingly weary and very critical of Erdogan and the direction he's taking Turkey. And so, with the Trump administration in place, these were largely disregarded, and that's why we saw Turkey very much invested in a Trump win in November 2020, almost actually, to the extent where the Turkish government was almost going to announce a national day of mourning when finally Biden's win was announced. And so, what does this mean for the U.S. establishment? Well, a Biden victory, someone that's been in the U.S. establishment for almost 5 decades, essentially means that the US government is back to its default factory settings. And what does this mean? This means that there'll be an American administration, a White House that is more in sync with Congress and Pentagon. We've seen in certain actions by Congress, for example, when deciding to sanction Turkey, there was an overwhelming majority, I think more than 95% of members of Congress voted to sanction Turkey, despite the fact that there's a Friends of Turkey caucus in Congress that has over 150 members, of which again 95% voted in favor of sanctioning Turkey. And this was largely thanks to the kind of decisions that the Turkish government took. The S-400 purchase from Russia especially was a significant red line. And I think so going forward then, if White House is more in sync with Congress, Pentagon, the think tanks here in DC that are all very weary of where Turkey is going, I think we're going to be able to see a US that's more rational in pursuing its own national interests. There's no more obstacle in the White House that, counting on its own whims, really just incapacitating DC in countering Turkey in its regional operations. And so, I think there's going to be a DC that's much less sensitive to Turkey's irrational fears. As I said, a US that's going to be following and pursuing its national interest in a much more rational way. And if it's going to do this rationally, then it's going to see that the Turkish state's objectives and actions in the region have largely been opposed to American interests. They're not aligned anymore. They're objectively not, in large parts, not aligned. There are still certain theaters in the region and other parts of the world where Turkish and American interests overlap. But in large part, in the Middle East, American interests are objectively in conflict right now with Turkish interests. And what has devised American policy towards the Kurds for the last 7 or 8 decades has been this sensitivity to Turkish interests and Turkey's irrational fears. And so, for example, in Rojava, American interests in Rojava, in Syria, in the Middle East largely, is to remain and have some sort of a say in an ultimate solution to whatever's going to happen in Syria. And I think the US is now very well aware that the only reliable partner to this end it has is the SDF. Now, under the Trump presidency, you had an American administration that off the cuff, with a tweet could devise policy without sitting down with any of his major policy advisors, and after a phone call with Erdogan could really completely recalibrate American policies in the region. But right now, as I said, with Biden in the presidency, with someone that's devised a national security team who have been on the ground, who know the issues, like Brett McGurk, and there are others like Brett McGurk who have been on the ground in Rojava, in Kurdistan, in other parts of the region, who are now here based in DC, in the White House, actively advising Biden in devising regional policies. And so I think going forward, I don't know if we're going to be able to say whether US support for the SDF or Rojava will increase, decrease, or remain the same. But at the very least, what we can be sure of is that Turkish sensitivities or Turkish irrational fears will no longer have the impact and influence that they've previously had in DC. And so while I'm not quite sure if support for Kurds is gaining ground in the US, but at the very least, what I can say that the debate is much hotter now than it previously was. And something that has drawn a curtain over American eyes for the last 7 or 8 decades is no longer there, or is no longer effective, despite Turkey raising its budget for lobbying here in DC. We can see that it's no longer effective as it once used to be. And so I think to not drag this on much longer, I think what we have here in DC is a very right atmosphere to push home and try to explain to American decision makers that investing in a peaceful and stable and democratic solution to the Kurdish issue in all 4 parts of Kurdistan is well within American regional interests as well now, and that they no longer have to devise their foreign policy objectives, with the whims of the Turkish government or their irrational fears to the matter.
Okay, thanks very much, Geran. I really appreciate the fact that you were able to join us as well. I know that you have to leave fairly shortly. So on behalf of everyone, thanks for taking part, and we'd love to welcome you again if you do have to slide off in a moment. Colleagues, we're a touch behind on time, but there's several questions. I'm going to just take them all in one round if it's possible, and then ask our various presenters to respond to them. I'm going to start with Sarah. Sarah Glynn has been very involved in Kurdish solidarity work. Sarah, the floor is yours to put your question. Although she seems to be struggling to unmute. Claire, I don't know if you can
You should be able to do it now.
I can.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a question for Sally, actually. So just to ask, I mean, it's clearly a huge problem about both the ISIS prisoners and the ISIS families. And I was wondering if there's any organization, body, international body that is taking a lead on campaigning to get international involvement to take this on and to deal with this. You know, who should we be putting pressure on? Who should we be working with? Who should we be, you know, campaigning to get more involved? What's the mechanism to get more international involvement in this?
Okay, thanks, Sarah. Let me take a couple of the questions. I have one in the chat from Rahila. What can ordinary people do to support the Kurdish struggle, the Rojava revolution, and weaken Turkey's standing in Europe? I had an indication, Paul, I think you wanted to ask a question as well, and then I've got Margaret. You should be able to unmute yourself, I think, Paul. There you go.
Right, okay, I'll just go. So I was wondering how impactful internationalism with a collective aim to gain in peace in the Middle East has been affected by the impact of COVID-19. And have countries distanced themselves from achieving peace under the guise of dealing with their own COVID-19 issues and try, you know, basically absolving themselves from blame?
Okay, thanks, Paul. Margaret.
Well, very quickly, and it's wonderful to see Sally here and Meryl and all of you. I mean, it's the UK that has the closest connection with Turkey, far much a closer connection than the US. And our arms sales and our huge trade deals are absolutely horrendous when you think of what is going on. And I'm really glad that Sally mentioned all those people who they have to look after in Rojava, who are, many of them are the widows of ISIS fighters. But it's really important that every country brings back its own nationals to face justice in their own countries, and we should be doing that. And there's something so wrong in this country. What can we do more? There's an awful lot of also media way that they will always talk about the Kurds as being separatists, when the whole story of Ocalan's writings are towards peace. I mean, there's not going to be any peace until Ocalan is free, but we also need to do much more to promote this great admiration of the whole women's revolution in Rojava, which is a model for all our countries, including the UK. I think that we really have to do much more. We cannot allow the UK government to go on with this big trade deal, arms sales and military training, when these terrible things are happening, that even the Yazidi refugee camp is being bombed. So I'm just saying, let's try thinking much more strategically of how we can get the UK government is accountable for so much of the horrors that are going on in Syria. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Margaret. Sally, I'll ask you first to pick up the issue of ISIS prisoners and families, and perhaps some of the points Margaret touched on. Sally.
Okay. Well, hi to Margaret. I think Margaret should be here in Rojava because already she knows Rojava very well. Well, regarding this ISIS families and prisoners, there are some points should be very clear. We don't want to make those women and children to make a subject for the trade. I mean, for politics or to make a tool for politics or no. Everybody wants them, they can get them back. I mean, even the women and the children. And we are talking about maybe 42 or 43 countries which they are involved. And we are trying to contact them to get them back, but they are not doing anything for that. So from our side, I mean, in Rojava, we have a committee established within the administration. They are taking all the numbers, all the names, all what we have, I mean, the statistics about them. We have everything, but nobody wants to get them. I mean, many countries like Russians and others, they just applied and they were getting them. So, but we are not going to throw them also. And there are some rules to do it. For the pressure on the some, I think it should be pressure to make on the European countries and the European Parliament. And I mean, it's a humanitarian issue. More than that, those children, they should be at the schools, and we don't have, I mean, the sources to make them to go to the school and provide them what they should do, and even for the women. So I think it's international, and we have proposed maybe three solutions for them. You can get them back. If you don't get them, you can find a third country to take them. If not, you can help us to make some villages for them. And you can send your, I mean, teachers and schools and whatever it is. It's just, for example, like your citizens are living here, so you should look after them. So, and nobody, they are keeping silent, not doing anything. I think the pressure should be made on the governments mainly, because the people cannot there. And the organizations, I think now, this recent days, there is a European Institution for Peace. I think they are involved, and there are some delegations coming and going on in Belgium. So maybe if somebody can contact them, it will be helpful, I think. So this is regarding the ISIS. As I said, I want to state again, we are not trying to use them as a tool for politics at all. This is just a humanitarian case, and we are ready to help everybody to get them in official way, because we know some of them, they want, smugglers, they have smuggled many children, many women in different ways. They took them to Turkey. Maybe they have got those thousands of dollars. We don't want to make such a thing. But of course, we need an official organization to deal with us, and we are ready to help them. We are ready to give them. So this is regarding the ISIS case. And for for Margaret, for what we are doing, yes, now, of course, Turkey, they didn't buy these weapons, especially those techniques used for these drones, which they are used everywhere. First of all, I would like to state that Turkey is now not only dangerous for Rojava, it's dangerous for all the area and for all the world also. You can see what they have done, in Caucasian, in Eastern Mediterranean, and the Aegean, and in Libya, and everywhere. So it's really dangerous. So you don't know, you cannot expect what to happen. And these invasions in Iraq also, they are trying to destroy everything. And I think somebody should be stopped. If not, like a British government, they are still supplying those parts for drones used in these drones, and also Canada and others. So you can stop, selling them this for this, weapons used against the people, not only here, I mean in Rojava, but yes, we were the biggest victims for them, but they're using in many places in the others. And even they are selling to the other countries, just like many countries, even in Somalia and the others, are using everywhere. So I think there should be some pressure on the governments in UK and the others to stop selling those weapons and those parts used in this drone technology. I think should be done. I mean, thank you very much for.
Okay, thanks very much, Sully. Badia, I don't know if you have any comments to add at all, particularly about weapons sales and international pressure. Do you think there is enough? Do you think pressure is growing on Turkey and it's being felt, or do you think there is just absolutely not enough international pressure at the moment?
Yeah, of course, as I mentioned before, there is no enough pressure on Erdogan practices. So international interest must be grow. The international community who wants democracy and peace in the Middle East and in Turkey, we must find together a solution to stop Erdogan tyranny. So we don't feel this pressure from outside world, from other states. So we need to behave together.
Okay, thanks, Badia. And Meral, I wanted to give you the opportunity to respond as well to the issues there. And I would like to ask myself a question as well. Particularly, do you think now that given that some of the Turkish offensive didn't go well from their point of view, do you think that the Şengal situation is stable enough, or do you think that there is a likelihood Turkey could very possibly attack there in the near future?
So to the first question, recently I read an article by Francis Fukuyama on the threat posed through Turkish drones for the world. So interesting that he has written this first article on this issue. But I think what is needed, and we as, let's say, as Kurdish movement also need to organize this better, is a kind of international campaign against Turkish drones and arms sales, especially in Britain, in the UK, in Germany, and in Canada, because these are the countries who are selling, let's say, the technology, or let's say the pieces Turkey needs to produce these drones. So I think that's an issue, because we had to split. And if we were able to bring together all these campaigns and the working groups, etc., on that issue, maybe it would be more effective. So I think that's an important issue: how to coordinate, how to establish such an international campaign. That's one issue. To your question, you know, after this, in the eyes of Turkey, unsuccessful operation against Gare, what was interesting is that, I mean, just the second day of the operation, the Turkish media, which is completely, I mean, on a line with the government, no, 99% is controlled by the government itself. So just the second day, the Turkish media was just silent about the operation. And also after the operation, the KDP, who at the beginning just through its press and its politicians, etc., was also doing a lot of anti-propaganda, or let's say propaganda in favor of Turkey, was also very silent about the operation itself. So, I mean, that was remarkable. So they were also looking at the situation, okay, how to value that situation, how to continue. And one needs to underline that after 2015, when Turkey started this kind of of a very offensive policy, like attacking, trying to occupy, creating de facto situations, because this is how Turkey is doing foreign policy since 2015. So the Gare operation was the first, let's say, split in a way, you know, because they continued like this, and it always functioned in a way, and then in Gare suddenly it did not function, you know, so they were just, oh, what to do now? And so this really, I think, created a new situation. But I think that the situation in Shingal is not stable at the moment. It's really not stable. The whole situation in Iraq is not stable. It's not sure if we are going to have elections in October or not. I don't think that we will have elections, because, you know, Iraq is more and more becoming the center, or the central playground for the so-called Third World War, which is concentrating on the Middle East. So we see that regional and also international forces are concentrating their political and their military force on Iraqi ground, and especially on northern Iraqi, so that means southern Kurdish ground, which is creating a big risk for Kurdistan itself, and especially for the KRG. And I doubt that those on power are aware of this big risk. And in this sense, especially the policy of the US, they are going to do there, let's say, of Iran, Turkey's role, etc. So in this sense, I think that the tension in Iraq in general will get hotter, will be more hot, in the near future, especially in 2021. So, and in this sense, I really don't think that we will have a calm situation in Shingal, just the opposite, because the threats of the Turkish defense minister also show that, for example, it's like in Turkey, this is how the head is functioning. Okay, if it's not possible in one place, they will try to do it in another one. So that means that in the next days, it's possible that they attack Mahmud. It's possible that they make a kind of air attack or an air operation against Shingal. It's possible that they start a new military operation, because spring has come also in the mountainous area somewhere else. We don't know, but there are so many, let's say, factors that affect each other. For example, now the situation in Afrin, the last 2 days, there are news about increasing conflict between Turkey and Russia. Or, for example, how will the situation in Ukraine influence the situation on the ground here, for example? So, because this is not a local or just regional issue, it's an international conflict, it's an international war, it's the Third World War, which is happening now on Kurdish ground, on our homeland. And because there are so many different dynamics, and the tempo of the conflict is increasing from day to day, so that from day to day you sometimes have a completely new situation on the ground, and it's sometimes very complicated also to follow what's happening and to understand. But I think that this year, 2021, will be a year of very high tension in the whole region, and especially in Iraq. And that will directly influence also the situation in Shingal, positively or negatively, we will see.
Okay, thanks very much, Meral. We've got 2 minutes. We're nearly on schedule again before we start the other panel. I'm just aware Paul put a question about COVID and its effect in the Middle East. I don't know. Maybe Sally, can you just say very briefly, has COVID affected the politics in Rojava and the wider region at all, or has it almost been a neutral thing, or has COVID particularly impacted badly?
It's affected very badly, really. Not because of the death. Maybe now we have about 11,000 cases, infections, and we have maybe 405 or 10 deaths, and this is maybe, if you compare it, it's a little bit small number, not this case. But economically, it's a problem really, because those people are banned. I mean, as I said, many times there was lockdowns, I mean, for the cities and so. And the most important thing, and the committees and those organizations, they were coming in. We had many committees, I mean, to arrange to come and discuss and to see for the solution for those in Geneva, for many things. They are not able to come because of there is no I mean, lines, and the gates are closed. So we don't have even the connection with the European, with the other countries to deal with them, to explain what's going on, to find for the solution. And many conferences and even, I mean, the meetings just will collapse because of this COVID. So this is the problem really for us, the most things. I know there was a committee involved in this, looking for, I mean, to come and to see, to discuss for us and the Syrian National Coalition and Syrian Kurdish Coalition. They are just waiting over there since 4 or 5 months. They couldn't come in. So this is a problem really. So we are affected very badly, I mean, by this COVID, other than the economy and the people, the affections. And we don't know, because recently the number is increasing. Where it's going, we don't know really. I hope it will be maybe, I'm finished be soon. Thank you.
Okay, look, can I just, on behalf of everybody here at the event, thank Sally, Meryl, Badia and Geran, who has obviously had to leave at the moment, for your really brilliant, insightful looks at what's happening on the ground there. I think it's helped us to gain a better understanding of what the reality is at the moment. Without further ado, I think we should just move straight into our second panel discussion. We've got Lloyd Russell-Moyle, MP, and Elif Sarikan with us. Lloyd, as many of you will know, has been a tireless campaigner and extremely active. He's been the Member of Parliament for Brighton Kemp Town since 2017. I had the pleasure and privilege of being with Lloyd twice in Rojava, and I know Lloyd has been to the HDP Congress, and recently, as chair of the all-party parliamentary group, you launched the investigation, and a report is coming soon. So, Lloyd, we're really looking forward to hearing from you about what you've been working and what you've been doing, and also to hear directly from you as well why the freedom of Öcalan is so important to trying to resolve some of the issues that our panelists have been talking about just prior to this. Lloyd, it's good to have you here. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Look, it's always a real pleasure. And thank you for those who also on the call that I recognise. You know, many of you are friends and comrades, whether I've visited you or we've spoken online before. The all-party parliamentary group launched an inquiry because we were concerned that the political situation in Turkey was deteriorating, not improving. We launched the inquiry partly because myself and other MPs that had, with SImon, Claire and Ben and others who had gone and visited in Rojava, we saw actually how the region was so interlinked to the internal Turkish discussions around their treatment of their Kurdish communities, but also reports were coming about how MPs and parliamentarians were put on trial. I know SImon and others of my colleagues have been and visited a number of trials, and we felt that actually we needed a place to bring all this together within Parliament and to start considering it in a more routine way. Because what we heard, and we divided our considerations into a number of areas. Kurdish political representation, we know, of course, has been stymied by a set of legal processes where the ruling party has stripped the majority of HDP parliamentarians of their immunity, but also a large number of other parliamentarians of their immunity, often of cooked up charges. We heard, for example, how one of the charges was that one of the parliamentarians was involved in helping form the PKK. A date that they said he had formed it was before he was born. You know, these are ridiculous charges. They hold no weight. And how they had manipulated the trial system. So rather than as usual trials happening in the local area, they were all held in Ankara's central courts, where it was harder to mount a defence and provide witnesses. That is pretty well recorded. But what is less well recorded is the treatment, of course, of Kurdish municipal leaders, and we heard from them, and the closure of civil society organisations such as the Democratic Society Congress, and an intimidation policy against a number of the young people and youth organisations. And so we've heard that. Our recommendations are that the government there needs to speak out much more loudly about this. I also sit on the Committee of Arms Controls, actually, and our level of complicity in selling arms to Turkey, which include what is regulated in the Arms Control Committee, of course, is included in spyware and cryptography. This is items that are used to hack into activists' email accounts and telephones, to tap into people, and so you can persecute people more easily. And we are selling those kinds of goods to Turkey at the moment, and it is worrying. And we've heard about how some of that is used already. We heard about linguistic and cultural repression, and in fact, I mentioned this in a Westminster Hall debate that we had very recently. I received a letter from I'd written to the ambassador of Turkey in London and said, we're conducting this inquiry, we would love you to contribute. And it's an inquiry in Kurdish political representation in Turkey. He wrote back saying, there is no such thing as Kurdish political representation in Turkey. All people are equal. We have no laws that recognise minorities in Turkey, apart from some of the Christian and Muslim exchanges between Greece and Turkey. He did say, of course, quite rightly, that there are Kurdish representatives in Parliament who happen to be Kurdish, but he said, we don't consider them, we don't consider statistics, we don't consider recording. I repeated this in the Westminster Hall debate, and I got a letter from him fuming that I had suggested that he didn't recognise Kurds. He said, we recognise them, we just don't have any laws that protect them. Well, to me, there is something telling there. If you don't monitor groups, if you don't recognise groups, particularly linguistical and cultural differences in groups, what you do there is you are imposing discrimination. And we know that there are many Council of Europe treaties, the Council of Europe protocols that talk about the protection of minority languages, talk about the protection of minority cultures, and talk about the vital requirement for minorities to be recognised in law. Now, of course, Turkey has not signed many of those agreements, but they are in force in the Council of Europe, and Turkey is a member of the Council of Europe and should be abiding by the spirit of them, even if it's not legally bound. We looked at gender repression, and we also looked at freedom of the press. But the bit that I want to talk about in the final few seconds that I can talk and then have to finish up is one of the things that we looked at in our final session was about how Turkey uses this constant link with the PKK to be a carte blanche to repress any sort of freedom of speech for Kurdish autonomy, for Kurdish self-determination, or even Kurdish media. And they do it not only in Turkey, it is their right to some extent to do what they want in Turkey, although I think we would all argue that they are breaking international laws, things like this. But they also try and impose that view on other countries, Belgium, on Britain, so that they enforce. Britain does the enforcing arm of shutting down, and Belgium or the EU does the enforcing arm of shutting down speech that is legitimate political representation. And they do that because they have convinced the world that the PKK is purely a terrorist organization. Now, these issues are complex, and I think the APPG recognizes that. The fight for freedom for peoples is complex, and the line between a terrorist and a freedom fighter, we all know, is a difficult and grey line. But the pathway to peace must be to allow people to go from being considered a terrorist to be considered a political actor. And if you don't have those pathways, peace can never be achieved. Now, Britain did it in a haphazard way, but did manage to do it eventually with Northern Ireland, where you made a distinction between Sinn Féin and the IRA, and eventually you gave immunity to IRA, and we agreed that you wouldn't delve into the past of IRA fighters too much, because what we wanted to do was frame a forward peace where people came together to find political solutions. And the problem with Turkey, and the problem with other countries accepting Turkey's narrative, is it shuts down any pathway for negotiation and peace. And that is why also freedom for Öcalan is important, because as long as he is considered only as a terrorist and not as a political prisoner or as a political actor, a peace, a long-term peace, in our view, cannot be properly established. And that's not to say that Turkey necessarily needs to change the way that it thinks, although we would like it to, but that our countries, Britain, America, etc., need to start to change their dialogue on how they see not only the PKK, but people who might not be linked to the PKK, but of course have similar ideologies in terms of representation and freedom for Kurdish people, even if they don't share some of the methodologies, and even if they do. And without that, we can, as long as Britain and America and others continue to take on the Kurdish narrative without question, it prevents legitimate voices in our country speaking out and trying to achieve peace as well. And so we welcome, of course, a number of the court cases, the Belgian court case, the European court case, but our recommendations will say that Britain needs to look more seriously at how it considers legitimate Kurdish political representation, and seriously consider a process in which the PKK, just like has now happened in Belgium, is moved off being an automatic terrorist list to being a political actor, even if we dislike some of their actions, and even if some of their actions are violent, but that they should be considered in terms of international law as an international and domestic actor in a civil conflict. So that's some of the stuff that we've been working on, but the detail still has to fine-tooth comb it, and it will come out, I hope, very soon. Simon, mute.
Sorry. Thanks ever so much, Lloyd. And obviously, we're really looking forward to seeing the report, and we salute your brave efforts to actually address some of these difficult issues. You mentioned our own history in the UK, and I remember very well the bannings, the attempts to kind of just repress it and deny it, until finally we arrived also at the point where you have to talk to people and find negotiated solutions. So thank you for all of your efforts, Lloyd. They're really appreciated. Without further ado, I'll hand the floor straight across to Elif Sarikan. Elif is an anthropologist, I believe, from your studies at the London School of Economics, but you've also been a tireless campaigner, writer and organizer for the Kurdish movement. And most recently, you've become also the chair of the Kurdish People Assembly. It's great to have you with us, Elif, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Simon. thank you for organizing this. And, you know, I want to start, usually I end with this, but I want to start by thanking you and Claire and Ben and everyone else who has made this campaign possible for the last few years, and, you know, has achieved some of the stuff that I will also talk about for people who have joined us today. I feel like it's a bit of a task to kind of come at the end. There's a bit of an advantage of being able to do a roundup, but also, you know, especially after such incredible speakers, sometimes one feels like there isn't much left to say. But I think one of the things that we can say, particularly after we've heard, you know, so many people from the ground, but also talking about experiences from the ground, from a UK perspective, and therefore from a Freedom for Öcalan campaign perspective, I think, you know, we've seen just the difficulty in which so many of the people we've heard today have navigated a quite unjust international system. You know, when we talk about, when we hear about Rojava and, you know, South Kurdistan and North Kurdistan and everywhere else, we are also talking about and hearing about an international system at play in localities. And a lot of the people here today, who obviously are not alone and are representing broader structures and struggles and so on, have been bravely but also creatively navigating these difficulties in a very creative way. And I think I want to speak a little bit about the critical role of Öcalan, particularly for finding a solution. And in a way that will be kind of a bit of a roundup of what everyone has said, but also talking about solidarity with the Freedom for Öcalan campaign, but also the Kurdish freedom movement in general, again, in the UK, but also internationally. And I think talking about solidarity, particularly now, and after over a year of a pandemic, it takes on a different meaning. Even some sections of society and of people who, you know, the word solidarity or the concept of it was quite, I guess, far away from them in the last year, have really understood just how crucial solidarity is, first and foremost, to basically stay alive, but also to be able to, again, try and find or explore solutions to a increasingly failing system. And I think we've seen this and we continue to see this. And the reason why I also wanted to give that some recognition is because this is exactly what Öcalan means, not just for the Kurdish people, for the entire Middle East, but also potentially the world. It's about solidarity, but also it's about an alternative that not just that we need for the freedom of the Kurdish people, but increasingly we need everywhere we are. And when we see this, and we see, you know, just in the UK alone, more than 100,000 deaths from COVID. Now, of course, it's arguable whether these were preventable to a large mass scale or not. Like, these things, of course, these are up for discussion, but not the place here. I think the critical role of Öcalan becomes ever more present and ever more important. And it's not just that we need to free Öcalan and see what he does with it. We need the freedom of Öcalan because he also has a track record of trying to creatively and in a principled way negotiate for a peaceful solution that not just works for, in the case of Turkey, for the Kurdish people, but works for all peoples of Turkey. And I think this is really crucial because, you know, Bedia spoke about the peace process between 2013 and 15. You know, that process, particularly those 2 years, one could write, you know, volumes and volumes about it, particularly anyone who was on the ground. And I wasn't, but I had the you know, opportunity to hear many people who had that experience, and just the possibility of peace and the way it changed the environment of people and how people related to each other, how people organized with each other, how people, you know, try to mobilize around life and hope and peace together. And unfortunately, that was exactly what was very intentionally and very consciously crushed by the Turkish state led by Erdogan. And the reason why I say the Turkish state led by Erdogan, because of course, Erdogan has become the face of this, but unfortunately isn't the start and potentially would not be the end. I mean, of course, we would hope that after this, it would be the end and there is peace and freedom. But one of the things I think that became the fear and therefore makes Öcalan's role even more critical is the democratization of a state or the democratization of a society is an inherent threat to any kind of authoritarian, colonial capitalist state. And therefore, the possibility of peace and freedom as a result of a negotiation between Öcalan and also the PKK and the Turkish state, lit this like fire of fear in not just the Turkish state and not just the foundations of the Turkish state, but also many international powers who have an interest in ensuring and making sure that the Middle East remains undemocratic, because an undemocratic society is a society easier to control. And so what we see, what Öcalan has tirelessly done and, continues to do, particularly through his ideas, but any opportunity he gets through short and small messages when he is able to speak to family members, or of course very rarely, but when he does get the rare chance to speak to his lawyers, the message is always very consistent and the same. It's about democratization, it's a moral political society, and it's very crucially women's liberation at its center. And the reason why I mention this is because, again, when we see some of the stuff Bedia spoke about, when we see particularly these arrests, the co-chair system and therefore equal representation for women has become an indictment for terrorism. So people are arrested and these are official statements on their court orders that, they were a co-chair and this is terrorism. So women's liberation and women's equal representation has become, an excuse for terrorism. And I think, Lloyd was just touching on there must be a path to some sort of political solution and peace, and therefore an opportunity for quote unquote an organization to be able to transform from being taken or understood as a terrorist to otherwise to a political actor. And this is obviously a deliberate tactic and strategy, is that, of course, if that happens, then you must recognize the co-chair system, you must recognize democratic representation, you must recognize that the state must inherently transform, and in this case, of course, the Turkish state. And this is why we say Öcalan's role is critical in negotiating a peace between the Kurdish people and the Turkish state, not just because, and even though this is crucial, not just because he is considered by millions of people the leader of the Kurdish people, and there's been petitions that millions and millions of people have signed declaring Öcalan as their political will and therefore the person to negotiate on their behalf, but also because the alternative he offers we so desperately need for the democratization of the region and therefore the effect it will have on the rest of the world. And in terms of solidarity, I think, people, friends and comrades touched onto many elements of how the international system is connected. The international system that we are fighting is in solidarity with each other. And so to be able to fight this international system, we must, who believe in a free and just society and a world, we must be in solidarity with each other as well. I think, I can't remember who it was, but there was remarks about just how internationally connected, for example, the arms trade is. It's not that the arms trade isn't that the UK sells arms to Turkey and it ends there. It's British, Italian, German engineers and mechanics that maintain these arms and these parts and so on. So there is a genuine international solidarity between these states in even how obviously they declare war on people and nations and countries and so on. So therefore, we need to be in solidarity with each other to be able to fight against this as well. And again, of course, arms is a very crucial thing, but increasingly, other natural resources, which the Turkish state has a very long track record of using as weapons against its own people. But, you know, things like water and other natural resources are increasingly becoming, you know, weapons of war for states, and, you know, states that are, you know, very openly and clearly taking a fascistic turn. So yeah, I just like what I wanted to end on is the critical role of Öcalan is a role and is a offensive or a step or a phase that we desperately need for democracy. The democracy that we see, you know, being compromised everywhere else, even here, I'm not going to go into it too much, but, you know, there's been mass protests against this new bill that is trying to give police more powers, trying to curtail, you know, protests and so on. And there's been mass protests here. There's mass protests around many attempts at like anti-democratic laws and bills and developments all around the world. So the role that Öcalan will be able to play will also be a role for the whole world in being able to fight for the democracy and freedom that we need. And again, this is not just let's give Öcalan a chance. I want to reiterate this. Öcalan has a roadmap. He has a roadmap for peace. He has a roadmap for these negotiations, and he has a roadmap. He's very confident and has declared this many times. He says, I believe in myself and I can do this in 6 months. And so we need freedom for Öcalan, crucially. We as progressives, as trade unionists, as activists, as you know, people who believe in democracy, we need to be able to fight all together in the coming weeks, months and years, because we also have no other chance to win if we are not fighting together. And yeah, and again, support the Freedom for Öcalan campaign. I didn't get to talk too much about some of the things we've done in the last few years, but, you know, it's already, with actually quite limited resources, I'm sure, you know, SImon and Claire could speak to this as well, has achieved a lot in terms of being recognized and being, in a way, finding its home in the trade union movement in the UK. It has already started its relations and reaching out to trade unions across Europe, from Italy to some Nordic countries, to, you know, Belgium, and also trade unions in South Africa as well. I know this last February, the 15th of February, which is the anniversary that Öcalan was captured as a result of the international plot, there were even messages from trade unions based and in the US. So the fight continues, and the fight is a hopeful fight, and please join us in this. Thank you very much.
Thanks ever so much, Elif. I think you brought that together brilliantly, and really, you know, brought it to a head in terms of how critical, not only how critical Öcalan is and his freedom is to resolving some of these problems, but the other aspect as well, how critical it is that we continue to build the international campaign for his freedom, from which flows all the issues of peace, democracy, instability, or the lack of it that need addressing, that our other contributions have addressed. Colleagues, we've not got long. There's 15 minutes still on the clock. And Sally,
can I say some words?
Of course you can say some words. I would never dream of preventing you saying some, Sally. Please, the floor's yours.
Yeah, thank you. This is just a short statement, I mean. Well, we are talking about the crucial role of Mr. Öcalan for the peace, or whatever it is. Now, everybody knows how much the world is connected to each other. And what's happening in Europe, I mean, explosions and so, and even Erdogan is making his blackmailing to Europe and to the other countries. It's just because the conflict in the Middle East. Is it right? Yes. Mm-hmm. And now I mentioned that the Syrian conflict hasn't been solved till now because of the Turkey doesn't want to be solved. So, and even I would like to say, in Syria, there will be no peace if the Kurdish issue in Syria is not solved. And even Middle East, there wouldn't be a peace in the Middle East if the Kurdish issue is not solved, because we are talking about 50 million people here. And maybe if we do it, I mean, in Syria, tomorrow is Iraq, and the other day is the North Kurdistan, and also in Iran. So it's a very big conflict, I mean, in the Middle East waiting for us. And the only person can stop this and can make peace is Mr. Ocalan, because he has followers in all over the Kurdistan. Now, if you are talking about 50 million Kurds, believe me, there are more than 30 million people that are just obeying the orders from Ocalan, and they can stop it. So there will be no peace in the Middle East, and otherwise there will be no peace in Europe if the Kurdish issue is not solved. And the man who can solve this Kurdish issue in the Middle East is only Mr. Ocalan. I just want to remind what Mr. Pangalov said in 2004 in the court in Athens. He said, well, now it was in 2004. He said, I know well why they have captured Mr. Ocalan. If they didn't capture him, they couldn't invade Iraq. You see how much the issues are connected to each other. So this reality should everybody realize. If you want the peace in the Middle East and you want the peace in Europe, you should solve the Kurdish issue. And the Kurdish issue, the only one man can solve it, which is Mr. Ocalan. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Sally. As I said, there's a few minutes for people to put any questions if they'd like to. The floor is open. Please either raise your hand or put it in the chat. I can't see all of the screens here, so please do. I did have one question that was left by Paul, who had to leave, that was put to Lloyd, and he wanted to know, Lloyd, if the UK arms industry is actually working at all to influence the UK-Turkey trade deal because of the obvious interests there. I don't know if you're in a position to shed any light on that at all.
I'm sure the UK arms industry is busy beavering away, defending its, fighting for its own self-interest. I mean, that's what I suspect every industry is doing. In that, so I don't think we should think it's some malign kind of force. It's not. It's their working way. The Turkey trade, UK-Turkey trade deal actually is a trade deal that we've not really scrutinised much at all in Parliament. I sit on the Trade Committee, and we're all busy focused on Asia Pacific at the moment. Mm-hmm. So that is actually, you have prompted me to go back to the committee and ask where we are with the Turkey deal discussions. And I might ask one of the representatives to come back in, who is on the negotiating team. One of the things that I have been worried about with the trade negotiations is that with the EU, they always have opposition parties from both sides have to be part of the negotiations, and you create a parliamentarian form of opposition parties. The UK has not required that. In fact, has abolished that in its bilateral trade deals. And that means they are just deals between government party to government party, and they include no opposition party discussions in that. So whereas the EU Turkey trade arrangements will have some requirement for opposition party members to be in those discussions with the EU, even reviewing it or scrutinising it, not in the actual negotiations, but the UK Turkey one will not, and that is a problem. Okay, thanks very much, Lloyd. Margaret, I see you've got your hand up. Would you like to take the floor, put a question? I'm not sure she's heard that. Okay. Is there anybody else that would like to put any questions or make any comments? Okay. Well, look, perhaps it's time to start drawing things to a close. I would particularly, obviously, again, like to
thank everybody. Oh, I'm sorry, I've missed a question. I do apologize, I missed it entirely. There was a question asking about what the current state is with the HDP in Turkey in terms of being banned. The colleague is asking, is that imminent? Is it about to happen? Perhaps Badia, you could possibly answer that.
Oh, sorry, I've not come back.
Oh, Margaret, just
Sorry,
a moment.
I'm now back.
Margaret, just a moment. If Badia can answer the question about the HDP, and then I'll bring you in, Margaret, and then Sarah. Badia.
Yeah. At the moment, of course, in the last 5 years, from the beginning also, the government attacks against HDP, and nowadays they are trying to close it. They are trying to plan to close the HDP, but of course, until now, they arrested many of us. If it is not very possible to give an exact number, but over 10,000 members of HDP was arrested. Now still over 3,000 of them is still in the prison, and 5,000 of them in exile. I just say the not exact numbers. These are the members, executive committee members, deputies, former deputies, mayors, and council members, and the others who did not arrested are under the control system. They have to always go and sign in the courts. So this is not, there are many pressures on against HDP, but it is impossible to close it because there is over 20 million supporters in Turkey. There is another thing. So the state or the government with their allies want to finish all the opposition. That's why they are trying many ways against us.
Okay, thank you very much, Badia. I've got Margaret and then Sarah. Margaret.
Okay, but very quickly, Lloyd, why are we getting nowhere with a judicial review on the UK's breach of the ATT? And whenever we read in the media or anywhere, it's always about Saudi Arabia and Yemen. And it's a complete silence. And you know that Turkey isn't even on the list of the kayak in the Ministry of, I mean, there's lots of actions that we can take. But I really think when you know that every day what is happening in Afrin, what is happening all over Syria, what's happening in Turkey, that our arms sales are playing a very important point. But I want to know, Lloyd, from you, why all the efforts that we're trying to get a judicial review of the arms sales, why is there such silence about this? Thank you. And also, I just want to say that when Sally was talking about all those people from the UK, women and children, who were groomed or somehow got to Syria and are now a great burden on Rojava, what we've done by not bringing them back, we're putting trade and our security before human rights. Every single person has a right to justice. And that's why we should be taking a lead and bringing back to this country all the people who went out. Not every woman went out to murder and kill. A lot of them were mislaid or seduced or followed husbands. But, you know, we're now, it's terrible that actually human rights is absolutely gone out of all our foreign policy and our trade deals.
Thank you very much, Margaret. Let me just take Sarah's question as well, if I could, Lloyd. Sarah?
Yeah, it was just partly a reminder and partly a proposal that, you know, we spend a lot of time quite rightly saying the EU isn't doing enough, or they're doing the wrong things, actually. I mean, the EU has been absolutely appalling, and the UN and the CPT isn't doing enough, and our politicians really don't seem that interested. But of course, we know that they're only going to be interested if there's enough pressure from below. So the importance of a lot of our energy is not just going into pressuring the politicians, but actually spreading the word and getting more people involved in putting pressure on the politicians. And I mean, obviously that's what Freedom for Ocalan is doing with the trade unions. And I think one of the things that I find very inspiring is what they've been doing in Italy in getting you know, the different Italian places that have been making Ocalan an honorary citizen, and you know, and the sort of things that happened with Mandela and naming streets. You know, if we can have campaigns for things like that, not because it matters so much that there's a street called, but it's the discussions that you have in order to make those things happen that make people aware. So yeah, the more that we can spread the word to put the pressure on our MPs. Otherwise, we know that, you know, that they can, not the one that's here, but most of them will just get away with murder.
All right, thanks very much, Sarah. Lloyd?
Hello. Yes. Look, on the arms trade treaty stuff, there was a judicial reviews. You choose often what you think is the most egregious cases of breaches to try and prove that the government is breaching the law. The campaigners and the campaign against the arms trade have chosen and believe that the most egregious breach is probably in the Yemen with Saudi Arabia, but that would probably demonstrate breaches around the whole piece. The court decided that they had breached the law. The government has then kind of tried to say that it's not and changed the system, and there is a court case pending on that. Court cases take a long time, I'm afraid. That's just how it is. But I believe that the government has done bad things on that. And then, but there is a bigger problem around, now we're out of the European Union, the government can start to move away from European law on these matters. So it is a big problem, and we need to keep up the pressure. That's one of the reasons we did the report on political representation in Turkey for Kurds, because we want to keep up the pressure. And we will reconsolidate the left and liberal caucuses in Parliament on the arms trade committee and start considering what we do beyond now. But at the moment, I can't tell you any great things on trade, on the arms trade, that we are focusing on Turkey. The reality is the committee has not properly been doing its day-to-day work, let alone individual investigations. We will get there, but I'm afraid it's not immediate. And with Sarah, I agree, we need to keep up the pressure, particularly at the international sphere. And what's important from the Labour Party perspective, I think, is to make sure the Labour Party, which I'm a member of course, doesn't regress into just the old rhetoric of, you know, kind of, oh, well, it's all just terrorism, we can't really do anything here. And that's why, again, our report hopefully tries to change some of that discussion.
Thanks very much, Lloyd. We're coming to the end here. Elif, did you want to come back with any final comments at all? No? Okay. I don't know if any of our other invited guests wanted to make any final remarks at all. Badia or Sally or Meryl? Okay. Well, look, colleagues, I'm going to draw things to a close because we are at the end of our time now. I want to really put on record our thanks to all of our speakers that have given us an excellent overview of the, you know, horrific situation on the ground in many of those places, but at the same time also they really were inspiring in terms of the will to keep resisting and to keep fighting. I think it's absolutely incumbent on us to carry on doing whatever we can to build the international campaign. We need more MPs here like Lloyd, who've got the courage to break some of the taboos and to address the real issues. We need to carry on building that campaign internationally. It is really criminal the way in which Turkey is allowed to still get away with its absolutely outrageous aggression, not just in Iraq, but in Syria, its interventions in Libya. And we always say to our members in the union, for often the Middle East and Turkey and the Kurdish thing seems far away, and people ask, you know, what's the relevance, what's going on? And yet there is the humanitarian, obviously the connection with somebody in prison for 20 odd years and deprived of their most basic human rights. There is the solidarity, wider solidarity issue with the Kurdish people, and there is also a self-interest. We try to make people understand what is going on in the Middle East will affect them directly, whether it's from the refugee flows that have politically destabilized Europe and have been used by the far right, or whether it's through other actions of extremists or whatever. It will and it does affect all of us. But also my message and the message of our campaign to all of our colleagues and comrades that have spoke tonight, and the political movement with which we identify, is this: we are not neutral as a trade union movement, and we are not neutral as a labour movement. We do recognise 100% that Sally, Badea, Meryl, Elif, and all of the other colleagues involved in this share our values. Your values are our values. Equality, justice, non-discrimination, democracy, and peace are exactly the principles and values that our trade union and labour movement was built on. So we are not going to be neutral bystanders. We are absolutely partisan. We are on your side. We will always be on your side, and we will stand shoulder to shoulder with you and carry on fighting with you for the justice, peace, and equality that you are demanding. I'm fed up with Zoom. I think everybody's fed up with Zoom. I'd rather be meeting with you physically and in person. But the one great thing that Zoom has allowed us to do is to bring us all together in this way and to listen to you firsthand as to what the very latest situation is on the ground. And it keeps us in contact and it brings us closer together. So let's carry on building on that basis. Let's carry on demanding the freedom for Öcalan, demanding equality, demanding justice, and let's move forward together. I'll finish by saying once again, thanks Sally, thanks Badia, thanks Meryl and Giran and Lloyd and Elif and all of the others that took part in tonight's event. It was great to have you with us and have the chance. Good night, and we'll see us again soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.